Today on the podcast, you will hear my interview with Dr. Molly.gebrian. She's a professional violist and a scholar with a background in cognitive neuroscience. Dr. Gebrian's area of expertise is applying the research on learning and memory to practicing and performing music. Her book, Learn Faster, Perform Better, A Musician's Guide to the Neuroscience of Practicing, was published in 2024 by Oxford University Press. As a side note, I do not have a book that I have recommended to people more often than this one. I devoured it when I read it. And I encourage all of my students to read it because it is fascinating and so completely actionable. I loved this conversation because she's so smart, so interesting, and so completely human and down to earth, which you don't always expect from a brilliant scholar and musician. I know that you will love hearing this conversation. Dr. Molly.gebrian, welcome to Crushing Classical.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
I am so excited to speak with you. The work that you have been doing around practicing in the neuroscience of being a musician is so interesting, has been so influential. I devoured your book. And so I am excited to speak with you about how a violist becomes this prominent and this important. So could we start by having you just introduce yourself to the listeners and give a little bit of the story that brings us to where we are right now?
Sure, absolutely. So it feels like there's a viola joke in here to me somehow. But anyways, in a nutshell, I am a professional violist with a background in cognitive neuroscience, and my area of expertise is applying the science of learning and memory to practicing and performing. Like you said, that's kind of an unusual background. So my sort of origin story, as an undergrad, I went to Oberlin College and Conservatory. And when I got there, I knew that I wanted to double major in viola performance and something, because I'd always really liked school and academics, but I didn't really know what, because I've always had lots of interests. And my first semester, I took a freshman only neuroscience seminar of some sort that just looked interesting to me in the course catalog. I was like, oh, I'll take this. And within 2 weeks, I was like, this is what I want to double major in. This is like the most interesting thing I've ever learned about ever in my life. So I double majored in viola and neuroscience purely just for my own interest on the neuroscience side of things. I had no plans to do anything with it, go on with it, nothing like that. So after I graduated Oberlin, I went to New England Conservatory to get my master's in viola. And I was like, okay, I'm going to be a violist. The neuroscience thing was fun. But then I got to NEC and I really quickly discovered that I really missed the neuroscience. But here I am at a conservatory. I can't, study neuroscience anymore. So fortunately, NEC allowed me to do a number of independent studies looking at aspects of music in the brain that I had gotten interested in at Oberlin. So basically, I did my own thing at NEC. And then after NEC, I went to Rice University to do my doctorate, again in viola, but I was back at a research university. So I was like, ooh, maybe I can do neuroscience again. So I was very fortunate that Rice allowed me to take graduate level neuroscience classes with the neuroscience PhD students pretty much the whole time I was there, even though it had nothing to do with my actual doctoral degree. And so, yeah, I did a bunch of stuff at Rice. I was the assistant director on 2 interdisciplinary symposia on music and the brain. And that's when I really started sharing the information that I knew about music and neuroscience with other people. I taught a class on, it was basically a music perception and cognition class, which was really great. And then, so for the last about 10 years, I've been a viola professor at 2 different universities, but I continued to write and publish things, make videos for social media, that kind of thing, on the science of practicing. Last summer, I moved back to the Boston area and I now teach at NEC. I teach classes on the science of practicing, basically my book in class form. I work one-on-one with students on helping them practice better. I do workshops. So it's been a very long and windy path to get here. None of it was really on purpose. It sort of just happened, but I'm not upset about how it turned out.
I love that. It's such a sparkling and exciting story about just following the things that interested you, even though they were not part of the traditional path.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I think a lot of musicians that I've spoken to come even a little bit later to feeling like they're allowed to lean into the interests that they have outside of the instrument. But it sounds like right away from freshman year, you had this passion and were able to follow it. And I just wonder, I have the feeling from a lot of people that they're afraid of the judgment of their peers. Like, if you are studying something besides like Baroque performance practice, you are clearly unserious as a musician, but no one would accuse you of being unserious as a musician. Like, did that ever come up for you?
This made me terrible. I really don't care what other people think. It's not their life. It's my
Excellent.
life.
Excellent.
And I actually didn't realize that I wanted to go into music until what I feel is relatively late. It wasn't until I was 15. I got tendonitis really badly the summer before my sophomore year in high school. And I had to stop playing completely that entire summer so I could get better. And when I couldn't play anymore, that's when I realized, like, wow, I really love music. And that was the first summer I'd gone to a summer music camp as well. And I had first made the connection that it was possible to have a career as a professional musician. I had never really like made that connection before in my brain.
Mm-hmm.
And so that experience combined with the tendonitis, like together, was like, oh, wait, I think this is what I want to do for my life. So it wasn't this thing that I had always wanted to do. I had always really liked school. I'd always really liked academics. There was never, ever a question in my mind that I would do anything but double degree as an undergrad. I only applied to schools where I could do double degree because I was not interested in going to a strict conservatory and giving up all my other interests. And yeah, I've just never cared what other people think. Like, I'm interested in it. College is expensive. Like, why not? And again, it's my life. It's not your life. So I'm going to do what I want with it.
I love that. I love it. I wish that at age 16, 17, I had that big an overview of like what is possible.
Yeah.
Because like my interests now are so much wider than they were when, like, as I went into my undergrad at a conservatory. I'm like,
Right.
okay, here we go. We
Here
are
we go.
strict focus.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Fascinating.
I mean, that was no, I mean, as a kid, I did a million things. I did gymnastics, I did ballet, I did Girl Scouts, I did theater, I played violin, viola, and cello. Like, I've always had like a
Yeah.
bazillion interests. And so the idea for me of picking literally just one thing and focusing on that, like, that was never going to happen.
I love it. I love it. I love like the how expansive your interests and your intelligence are.
That's, yeah, I've always just, yeah, the world is interesting. Why limit yourself?
Fantastic. Um, the uh, at a certain point, you mentioned that when you were already in working on your degree, you were already teaching classes in the neuroscience and like how to apply what you're learning over here to what musicians need over here. Um, how did that? Like, I guess my question is, how was that? Like, how was it received? And what was that experience like for you? Because like after that, you focused back into here I am teaching viola lessons.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it was funny at Rice. So the first no, wait. I was the assistant director for two interdisciplinary symposia. And I can't remember if this was for the first or the second, but the School of Music at Rice was sponsoring this event, and they wanted to get more student interest in it so that they would come to the various parts of the event. And so they asked me to do this lunchtime series called Pizza and Brains. The school supplied free pizza and soda because if you supply food, students will show up. And I basically was given free reign to give a little lunchtime class on anything that I wanted having to do with music and the brain. And that was the first time that like I said, I had started like sharing that with other people. And I don't really remember what I taught. I'm sure I taught some of the practicing stuff that's, in my book and that I talk about all the time now. I'm sure I talked about music cognition and perception stuff because that's always been really interesting to me. But I remember thinking two things. Wow, this is really fun to get to share this information with other people. And two, like those lunchtime things were always packed with people. Probably it was the free food, but like I was like astounded that there were so many other people interested in this. And in retrospect, I probably shouldn't have been. What I've found, since I've started sharing this is that people find this stuff fascinating, which is great because I do too. But yeah, my experience was like, wow, other people find this interesting. This is really fun. I want to continue to do this. But I think that if I had set out to do what I'm doing now for my career, which is basically, sharing this information and translating the science, I think if I had set out to do that, I don't think it would have worked as well. I don't think I would have gotten to where I am now, because I think a big part of what makes what I have to share valuable is all of my practical experience as a professional musician and a teacher, right? Like if I had, at Rice, like stopped playing and been like, well, I got my DMA, like I'm done with viola, like I didn't quite enter the world as a musician. You know what I mean? Like I had
Hmm.
been a student, but I hadn't had any professional experience. And I think that I'm able to share more because I have the practical experience of actually using the information I talk about myself and experimenting with it and trying it out, seeing how it works, seeing what doesn't work, tweaking it myself. So yeah, I think it was good that I continued to be like, okay, I'm a violist. This is what I'm doing, but I have this other thing on the side.
Yeah, so it's not that you're speaking about the academic truth of what the brain is and does. It's that you're speaking about like the actual hands-on experience of this is how I used this knowledge to like solve this problem in my practice room.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, all of this started from my own personal interest. Like, we spend so much time in the practice room. I really hate having my time wasted, and I like to use my time as efficiently as possible. And so it started from my own questions of like, there must be a better way to do this, And fortunately, I had teachers that did a really outstanding job of teaching me how to practice well. My teacher in undergrad, Peter Slowick in particular, really taught me how to practice. And I could see the connections between what he was telling me in my lessons about good practice habits and what I was learning in my neuroscience classes about how the brain worked. And then when I got to NEC, my independent studies were largely looking more into that. Like, what is the research on learning and memory and how the brain works? And how can I apply that to my own practicing? So I would read, reams of studies, be like, okay, this is what they found. What does that mean in practical terms for me in the practice room? And I would just start experimenting with things that was grounded in the research, but, figuring it out and then, sharing what I had learned both in the research and in my practical experience with other people.
Amazing, amazing. Now, you've talked a lot about, you've mentioned a lot, sort of flirted around the edges about time, about efficiency,
Yeah.
about practicing. And like that was some of the most mind blowing material as I was reading your book, also. Like, my instinct as a practicer, as a performer, is to like slide in and like find my way into my flow state and then just stay there for 3 hours.
Yeah.
And that's not what you recommend
No,
necessarily. Talk
that
to us.
is like the exact opposite of what the research shows, which is really counterintuitive because I think most people either think they should practice that way, like get this big block of time, 2-3 hours more if you can, practice as much as you possibly can. They either think that's the way to go, or they've been explicitly told this is the only way you can get better. You have to do this. But what the research is exceptionally clear on, and this research goes back to the 1880s, like it's not new information, we just haven't learned it yet, is that the brain needs breaks to learn, to get better at things. And actually, we make the most progress during breaks, which is the most counterintuitive thing in the entire world. The analogy that I've started using most recently, which is not in my book, actually, so second edition, it will be in there. But the analogy that I've started using most recently that really makes that light bulb go on for people is that of strength training, because I think most people have experience at least a little bit of strength training in some capacity. When you're trying to get stronger, you don't actually get stronger in the workout itself. You create micro tears in your muscles. And I think most people know this about like exercise science. You create micro tears in your muscles, and then on your rest day, basically, your body repairs those micro tears and it repairs the muscle stronger. And that's how you actually get better. Even if you don't know that science, I think most people know if you work a muscle really hard one day and you try to do the same thing the next day, it's not going to work very well, right? Your muscles need a rest. You're tired, you're sore. Like, your body probably won't let you do a workout very well, even if you want to. And so I think we all have sort of intuitive experience about this with our muscles. I think we know intuitively that if you tried to work out for 3 hours straight with no breaks every single day, like that would not work well for your body. And our brains work basically the same way. You're not creating micro tears in your brain when you're practicing, but you're giving your brain input the same way you're giving your muscles input, essentially, when you're working out. And then it's when you're taking a break that your brain actually does stuff with that information, because the brain has to make physical changes to itself, just like your muscles do, in order for you to get better at something. And so that's very counterintuitive, right? It feels
Mhm.
like, oh, I'm practicing, I'm getting better right now. You're not actually. You're giving your brain input and you're going to get better when you take a break. So shorter practice sessions, more breaks is absolutely the way to go. But like, again, it's really counterintuitive for most of us to wrap our minds around that.
Yeah, one thing that I thought about as you were talking is when I used to be an adjunct teacher and I would go to a place and I would sit and like teach 10 kids in a row,
Yeah,
and I had like 15 minutes between them, or sometimes one of those half-hour students would just not
not
show
show up,
up
right?
because it's college. And I always felt like my very best and most effective practicing was happening in those like tiny gaps between
Yeah.
students. And mostly I attributed that to the fact that I was in a practice room, which was a
Mm,
boring place with no distractions, nothing else I could do really.
yeah.
But now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, oh, look, 15 minutes, one
Take a break,
passage, dig in, and then like change tactic and right, change the path. And now I'm focused on somebody else. And now I'm
come back
eating
to it later.
lunch. And now I
Right.
come back.
Exactly.
Oh,
Yeah. Exactly. That's the way to go. And it's funny. I think all of us have inadvertently had experiences like that. I think people have had the experience of you're preparing for a recital and then you get really sick and you have to take a week off just rotting in bed because you
mhm.
literally can't get out of bed and you're freaking out, and then you get better and you go back to your instrument and it's better than before you were sick even though you had practice for a week. Like, what is going on? Or you get injured and you have to take time off and then you come back and it's better. Or you have a very weird teaching schedule and you have these little teeny bits of time to practice, like you were saying. I think we've all had experiences like that and we're like, wow, I got a lot better. Like, but it feels like a fluke. Like, well, I'm not going to like trust that. Like, if that was my choice, I would never do that. But actually, what the science says is you should trust that and you should choose it, because you'll learn much more effectively and efficiently if you do take all of those breaks.
Amazing. So how do you, like, let's say you actually are working on a recital, you're working on an audition, like you know that there is an end point to this practice and that there's a goal you're trying to get to. How on earth do we trust that playing and then stopping is gonna work when the instinct is to like
Not do that.
dig in for 4 hours at a time?
Right. So I have various answers to this. I'll start with the simplest one, which is how I encourage people to get started with this, because I totally get how scary it is. I knew this research, but was not willing to try it because I didn't trust that it would work, because it was so different from how I'd
Mhm.
always practiced, what I'd always been told. And then early 2020, everything started getting canceled because of the pandemic. Suddenly I had no concerts. Nobody had any concerts. And I was like, well, this is the perfect opportunity for me to try this out. I tried it out and lo and behold, it works. Of course it does. So what I encourage people to start with is just do an experiment on yourself. Pick something that doesn't matter. Like, pick some piece to learn for fun, and you're only allowed to practice it max 30 minutes a day. So it's not like you're devoting a lot of practice time to this thing because you have lots of stuff to practice. Pick something you want to learn for fun. Max you're allowed to practice it is 30 minutes a day, and start incorporating breaks just with that piece. In terms of, in the practice session on that piece, take lots of little, they're called micro breaks within the practice session. Space out when you're practicing that piece. Don't do it every day. Take, maybe a day off at first and then a couple days off, then a week, 2 weeks, and just experiment. And you'll prove to yourself that it works because you'll learn that piece a lot faster than the rest of your repertoire. So that's the first thing, to just have a no stakes experiment just so you can see the effect of it. The second thing, in terms of a performance, is I always advocate that people do what I call a backwards schedule, to plan backwards. I think people think that the date they need to be prepared for their recital is the recital itself, but that is too late. Um, so you need to work backwards from there. I always tell my students that their drop dead date is at least 2 weeks before, such that if the recitals got rescheduled somehow to 2 weeks before, they'd be fine. They could go on stage and play no problem. So you have those last 2 weeks to practice performing. But when you make a schedule going backwards like that, and so you have your 2 week before a drop dead date, and then from there you work backwards and you figure out your other milestones of, practice performances at a retirement home, let's say, or you're going to play the first movement in studio class for the first time or something. Like, figure out milestones along the way, and then once you have that in your calendar, then you can figure out, okay, how am I going to practice to be prepared for these, but also such that I can take breaks from this. I think people either don't plan at all and it's kind of a just panic and go, or they only plan forwards and they don't give themselves enough time, and then they don't have time to take longer breaks. Um, So as an example from my life right now, I have a bunch of concerts of new repertoire, new to me repertoire, in the fall. The first concerts are going to be at the beginning of November, and then there's more in December, and then there's more in like April. So it's kind of all spread out. Um, I started learning that repertoire mid-May. I'm at the point right now in my preparation that I am starting to do full run-throughs of individual movements. And it's the beginning of August, right? So I am August, September, October. I have 3 months ahead of time. I have my first rehearsals with my pianist the last week of August. So my plan for myself is to be totally performance ready in time for those rehearsals, even though that's still like 2 months before our first performances. And then after those rehearsals, I'm going to put the music down for a couple weeks and not touch it at all. I have a schedule of breaks that I came up with during my pandemic experiments of taking breaks. So I have already taken at least 2 weeks off from everything that's part of this recital as part of the learning process. But I'm able to do that because I started so far in advance. I know that people don't always have that luxury, right? Because
Mhm.
the demands of life are such that sometimes we don't. But I think that once you start to experiment with breaks, your idea of how long do I need to learn something starts to change. I actually learn music a whole lot faster now than I used to, but I allow myself more time so that I can build in those breaks.
Yeah, the thing that stands out, and that, like, just to get personal, because you shared
Yeah.
your personal preparation, I think the problem that I bump into is that up until 3 months before a recital, like, I haven't decided what I'm gonna play.
Hmm.
I'm a creature of the moment. I'm like, what would be
What do I
fun? Like,
feel
what would
like?
go with this? What do I feel like?
Yeah.
Um, it is hard for me to imagine, like, what I am going to actually want to perform in February.
Yeah. Right. That is not me. I think there are many musicians like that, and I cannot conceive of that. I need to know ahead of time, at all times,
Mhm.
for all things in my life, what the plan is and what's happening and what's coming. I cannot think of anything more stressful than deciding in the moment just a couple months before what I'm going to perform. So that is just a personal thing for me.
Mhm.
It brings me a lot of comfort to know, okay, this is the repertoire I'm going to be playing in April, even though, I mean, I started it almost a year before, right? I mean,
Yeah.
the first
Yeah.
concerts are in November, but like I would I'm the opposite of a procrastinator. I start things as early as humanly possible and get them done as well before the deadline as I possibly can. Um, so, but I also wonder if people like yourself, because there's many musicians like that who like, I don't know what I'm going to feel like to play. If you have ever had the experience of planning super far ahead, like I do, to actually know that you prefer to do it the way you've always done it. Because when I have worked with students who have always done that, like, plan the repertoire, what I would consider last minute, like, what do I feel like playing? When I've convinced them to give it a try, to, plan it a lot further out, the reaction is always, oh my gosh, I am so much more relaxed about this. I am so much less stressed. This feels really weird. I'm really used to panicking, and I'm not panicked right now, and I just feel fine. They find that they do prefer it. I'm sure it's not everybody, but my reaction to that is always try it once as an experiment and see what you think.
Okay, that is a lovely idea, and one that I could consider taking on,
Yeah.
because to bolster your argument, I would say that when I do return to pieces, when I play something that, like, I performed a few years back and I'm coming back to it, something that I've taught a lot, something that I've played as a student, of course it's more comfortable.
Yeah, right.
Like, of course it is. The fact that I've learned it in the past and now I'm just refreshing, relearning, bringing my new perspectives to it.
Yeah.
Like, of course. Of
Of
course that's
course.
easier.
Yeah, and
But
you see new things musically, you think about the piece in a deeper way, like you
mhm,
understand it differently, and I think that it's easier then to communicate that depth of knowledge to an audience because you know the music on
yeah,
such a rich level, right?
yeah.
And planning music now till November, it's not like I'm not going to practice anything else that whole time. I'm going to take time off and I get to practice other stuff, right? So it will feel fresh when I come back to it. I just will have like pre-learned it in a way.
I love it. I love it. What was I just writing down that I wanted to follow up on? I feel like I don't know what I wrote down. I feel like one of the other things that you talk about that is really interesting to me and feels again counterintuitive to the way I grew up practicing
Yeah.
is the idea of interleaved practicing.
Yeah.
Like do something and then stop doing it and do something different. What?
Right, exactly. Yeah, and this is connected to the idea of taking breaks. But yeah, in a nutshell, interleaved practice is essentially what you just said. You work on something for a while, you go work on other stuff, and then you come back to that first thing, work on other stuff, come back to that first thing. We tend to practice where we pick one thing and we just focus on that for a big block of time. And then when you're done with that, then you work on other stuff. But you do your big block on that, finish whatever you have to do, and then go back. The research, just like the research on taking breaks, is exceptionally clear that you make a lot more progress when you do interleaved practice, when you're constantly switching between things, working on something for a while, stopping, coming back later. The analogy I make for this, which is also not in my book, that I wrote the book in 2021, so it's 2025 now. I have evolved in the way I talk about these things. But the analogy I make for interleaved practice that helps it click for people is if you took a class, in college or whatever, and in the very first class, the professor spent a lot of time talking about some topic and then never ever mentioned it again, and it showed up on the final exam, you'd be like, what the heck is this? Like, we talked about this, I guess, but that was like a million years ago. Like, I don't remember that. Versus if the professor talked about that topic a little bit in every single class, by the time you got to the final exam, you'd be like, oh yeah, like we're talking about this all the time. Like, obviously I know that. So all of those little refreshers that you get are really helpful for the brain. When we're practicing, if you practice something in one big block and then don't see that again until like the next day you practice, that would be like the professor only talking about it in that first class and then never mentioning it again. But if you, throughout your practice session and throughout your practice day, you return to something, you don't have to return to it for very long, but return to it, give yourself that little reminder, it helps it stick better in your brain. And again, yeah, like you said, it's very, very counterintuitive. I love to do what's called blocked practice, just focus on one thing for a long period of time. But my practicing has really changed over the years because the evidence is just so compelling that, yeah, interleaved practice is the way to go, particularly if you want to perform well. And that's the thing that really sold me on it. I could really see the benefits in performance. I remember the first concert I ever gave after having done interleaved practice for the first time as part of my preparation. In the concert, I was like, wow, like I'm playing so much better than I ever have before. I'm so much less worried. Everything is so much more consistent. Like, yes, I'm sold. I'm doing this for the rest of my life.
That's really interesting. So a thing that I do, again, to tell a personal story,
Yeah.
a thing that I do and a thing that I advocate for my students is when we've got a set of repertoire that we're trying to prepare, I make a cut sheet sometimes and I just like pull out, extract the things that I know are hard from
Yeah.
each piece so that I don't get tempted to just start at the beginning and play through
Right.
the hard thing and then
Yep.
like freak out a little bit.
Yep.
And on that one page or two pages, I've got just a whole bunch of snippets of the things that are hard for me, and I can tackle that
Yeah.
um, daily, every other day. Like I can just deal with those things in and of themselves so that when I insert them back into the piece, they don't have the same emotional charge because I've just dealt with them over and over again. Is that like, does that have a relationship to your idea of interleaved
Yeah,
practice?
it can. I mean, if you, let's say you have 5 things on your sheet, just to make this
Yeah.
explanation easy, if you are just focusing on thing number one today and you do a big block of practice on thing number one and you don't look at the other things at all, that's not interleaved practice. But if you, work on thing number one, go work on, other stuff, or maybe thing number two, thing number three, come back to thing number one. If you're constantly changing between them within your practice session and within your practice day, then yes, that is interleaved practice.
Cool. Yes, I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. And then like only every now and then does it come back into the context
The
of the
piece.
full piece.
Right, right.
And cool. Lovely. Um This is so fascinating. I feel like I could talk to you all day, but I cannot actually talk to you all day. We have other things to do. Will you,
Yes.
first of all, is there anything else that you would like to share here that I haven't made space for in the conversation?
Thanks for asking that. Yeah, I mean, I think the most important things I always want to share with people are the importance of taking breaks and interleaved practicing, because I think those are the two that are the most counterintuitive for people, the two things that most people have not heard of before, and the two things that most people aren't doing, but give you the biggest bang for your buck. The other thing, actually, I'd say is mental practice. That one often people have heard of, but often people don't know what it means or how to do it. And that's another really, really powerful way to make progress with practicing. So maybe I should just talk about that
Please.
briefly before we say goodbye. So essentially, mental practicing is being able to hear and feel and imagine everything you need to be aware of when you're actually playing. And it's not a passive thing. It's not like listening to a recording. It's feeling and hearing yourself do it in your own imagination, as if you were actually playing your instrument. And it's solving problems. So for instance, your passages that you pull out that are the hard ones, can you hear it correctly in your head? As a string player, often it's can be hard to play because it's hard to hear if it's something really dissonant or something. So can I hear it accurately? Can I hear it with the sound I want? And then can you feel yourself play it accurately on the instrument? So me as a string player, can I feel my fingers going in the right place
Mm.
on the fingerboard, the right spacing between them? Can I feel what my bow has to do? All that stuff. Anything that's not correct, I can fix it in my head. And once it's fixed in my head, then it will be fixed on the instrument. Or closer to being fixed anyway. The research on mental practice is very clear that when people do both mental and physical practice as part of their regular just practice regimen, that they make a lot more progress than if they only do physical practice. And most people are only doing physical practice. We tend to think that if you're not actually actively playing your instrument, it doesn't count and it's wasted time. But incorporating mental practice can be really, really powerful. People often ask, well, should I just sit down and like just do mental practice like on the couch? Like, what should I do? You can, sure, if you want. Most of the time, what I do is I'm constantly going back and forth between mental and physical practice. So anything
Hmm.
that I want to work on, I'll mental practice it first, make sure, okay, can I hear it? Can I feel it? Is everything clear in my mind? Once the answer is yes, then I try out my instrument based on the information I get from my instrument. Maybe it sounds great. Okay, wonderful. Let's go practice something else. But if there's stuff to fix, first I'll fix it in my head and then I'll do it on my instrument. So I'm constantly going back and forth in that way.
That's amazing. Like, that sounds so, like, it sounds so fun. It
Yeah.
sounds so inspiring and also, like, less exhausting on the muscles, less, like, prone to overuse injuries, less tiring. I could
Yeah,
spend more
exactly.
time, um, if I wanted to and if that were advisable. I
Yeah.
could spend more time if I didn't have to, like, worry about the actual muscles of my embouchure.
Right. And that's the other thing. It really saves wear and tear on the body. And so it can really extend the amount of time that you're able to practice, especially if you're suffering from an injury like I was in high school. I wish I'd known about mental practicing then. I didn't. Or, if you have muscle fatigue, especially, yeah, for wind players, like it's going to get fatigued. Singers too. Like
Mhm.
you can't sing that much as a singer. Um, so yeah, I mean, that's another benefit is that you can get a lot of work done away from the instrument itself and have it be just as beneficial, if not more beneficial, than actually just like playing the instrument.
Amazing. Amazing. This conversation is such a freaking inspiration. Thank you so much.
I'm so glad.
Um, I will put your links in the show notes, but where's particularly would you like to send people? Where would you like people to follow you?
Yeah, the easiest place to go is my website, which is just my name, molly.gebrian.com. Everything else is linked to on there. My YouTube page that has a whole bunch of videos. Everything is on my website except for my Instagram. I'm just realizing. So I'm also just Molly Gebrian on Instagram. So those two places are the places to find everything else that is out there that I do.
Wonderful. Dr. Molly Gabrian, thank you so much for talking with me today.
Thanks for having me. This has been great.